Hello. It's me. This isn't connected. Good morning, or afternoon, or whatever time of day it is when you're watching this. This is a little bit more of a serious one. Obviously, I've been releasing a lot of music that is about mental health and mental illness more specifically. Like I had Crazy that talked a little bit about mania. I had Anhedonia, which anhedonia is one of the major symptoms of depression. And then more recently I had Sway, which is about kind of the push and pull between the two. And I figured that it was about time that I talked about my experience with mental illness, less through the poetry of lyrics and more just directly to you. Because a lot of it is a new development, and a lot of it is stuff that I wish that I knew when I was first dealing with a lot of the symptoms and experiences that I was dealing with. I should mention now, while it's on my mind, I'm not a doctor. None of this is meant to be construed as medical advice. Seek out professional help if you're able to. I just want to relate my own experiences so that people can learn a little bit from what I went through. So I'll start not from the beginning, but from the more relevant piece of information. A couple years ago, I started to suspect that I had some sort of mental illness. I was having, panic attacks. I was also experiencing bouts of depression, as well as what I now understand to be hypomanic episodes. And a hypomanic episode is something that people with bipolar 2 experience. Traditionally, the manic episode is what people probably think of when they think of bipolar. Like Kanye West's Twitter, anytime Kanye West's Twitter starts blowing up, that's usually a good example of a manic episode. Delusions and sometimes hallucinations. So that's like mania. And I don't experience that because people with bipolar 1 get mania. I am bipolar 2. It's called 2 because it's the more recent of the diagnoses. With bipolar 2, I experience hypomanic episodes. So hypo just meaning less intense. And for me, what that looks like is I would have my depressive episodes where I wasn't interested in doing anything and I was sad and I felt like my life wasn't going anywhere and I didn't feel connected to the world. What I didn't realize was the periods of time when I got really interested in a new hobby, or, at one point I wanted to try gymnastic strength training, and at another point I took up boxing. And, I would have all these sudden inspirations to try and sort of fix my depression, and I would think that they were working. So at one point I was doing a cold shower every morning, sort of quack remedies that people are happy to sell you on how to fix your depression. And I don't doubt that some of them work for some people. With bipolar, though, many of those little tricks are not that useful. Bipolar depression does not respond to the normal treatments for depression. And I say this as somebody who really did try everything before I investigated a medicative approach. I tried dialing in my diet, weekly exercise, meditation, airplane. I didn't try airplane. Let's wait for that to blow over. Yeah. So yes, regulating my sleep schedule, that if you get on a pretty regular schedule, it's supposed to help mitigate some of the symptoms, and that works really well for most people. And so I was going to bed at the exact same time every night, and I was waking up at the exact same time every morning and having the same thing for breakfast and going to work 7 to 3, 5 days a week. And I was still having these very intense symptoms, panic attacks, these hypomanic episodes. I've wound up with something like $10,000 in credit card debt from having these hypomanic episodes and being like, oh, what I should do is I should buy a brand new guitar. And I had this several $100 a month gym subscription that I got on a whim when I was hypomanic, and all these things that were really expensive. But when I was in this elevated state, I would think, okay, I'm gonna be a famous musician and it's gonna happen any minute now, and so I can afford to spend all this money because it's gonna pay off. I don't think that's a mindset that's exclusive to people with bipolar, but for me it was such an intense feeling that I felt like I could spend whatever amount of money necessary and I would make it back when I had this chart-topping single and when I was rich and famous. Obviously, that's not a financially sound way to view money. It's not a smart way to view my career either. With everything that I was dealing with at the time, it would have been much smarter for me to allocate my time and resources towards getting help. And to my credit, I did start seeking help. What I ran into, though, is that when it comes to psychiatric help, the system, at least here in Colorado, is really unequipped to help people. I started realizing I was having these intense symptoms, these panic attacks. At one point I was having seizures just from stress. I would call a psychiatrist's office, they would either say, we're not accepting new patients, we're affiliated with a psychiatric hospital, so you can either get admitted and find treatment, or we won't accept you as a patient, or there would be a several months long waiting list. To top it all off, I've been very skeptical of diagnoses and medications because I know there are a lot of perverse incentives in medicine in general, but in psychiatric medicine in particular, where so much of this stuff relies on me relaying information about my experiences to a psychiatrist and having them tell me what those experiences mean. Because I did a lot of self-research, which I think is a good thing, but what it led to was I know all the diagnostic criteria for all of these things. So I am not an unbiased reporter of my own experiences. I know which answers are going to steer the diagnosis towards bipolar, towards ADHD, because I suspected that I either had ADHD or bipolar, and especially in men, those two look really similar to where they're hard to differentiate diagnostically. So what I did was I ended up getting testing done. You can't test for bipolar in quite the same way, but with ADHD, you can do these attention tests, you can take an IQ test, and you would expect to see certain variance in how you performed in different parts of the test. If you had normal distribution in one, but there was an organizational way that it didn't pan out, that would be an indicator of ADHD. So I sought out this testing. There was one test where I just had a button and I was staring at a screen. If it flashed with a certain color dot, I would have to press the button. And if it flashed with another color dot, I would have to not press the button. And I did that for like an hour. After all these tests, some of which were actually very fun, they were able to pretty conclusively say that I didn't have ADHD. Only problem was that didn't say that I did have bipolar. What they had to do was cross-reference that with a DSM-5 interview where they reference my self-reports against the current psychiatric diagnosis criteria. I gave them permission to talk to my therapist, who I had been seeing for several years, and get her input on it. And with all of that combined, I was conclusively given a bipolar 2 diagnosis. And I'm glad I did it that way, because if I had just told a psychiatrist that sometimes I feel really happy and sometimes I feel really sad, and I don't know for how long, but sometimes it's for a week and sometimes it's for more, and the psychiatrist had been like, oh, you have bipolar, I don't think I would have believed that. Or I would have always had doubt. I would have always had in the back of my mind, like, is this a legitimate diagnosis? Is this just me saying what I want to say so that I can get the diagnosis that I want? So you would think you got your diagnosis. Great. Case closed. Not quite. I still needed to see a psychiatrist, which, as I already talked about, is no easy task. So I sought out a psychiatrist who did not accept insurance, huge out-of-pocket expenses. What I ended up doing, and what I think is a great resource, there's an app called Doctor on Demand where you can see a doctor or a psychiatrist via telemedicine, like a video chat call with a psychiatrist. There's basically no waiting list. You don't have to be admitted to a psychiatric hospital. They're accepting new patients. And that is the psychiatrist that I see to this day. What did I learn from my experience? I had the right intuition in the first place with what I was struggling with. Secondly, when I asked my friends and coworkers and family what they thought I was struggling with, everyone was like, oh yeah, we knew you were bipolar before you got your diagnosis. And it's worth mentioning too, my therapist had been telling me that I probably had bipolar for months prior to me seeking out this testing. My skepticism on this is a character flaw. Because I trust my therapist, I should have just been more trusting of her perspective on my mental illness too. There is no substitute for professional help. And therapy in particular has been really instrumental in me managing my bipolar disorder, although I am on medication now too. So these are the meds that I take. It is lamotrigine, which is the generic version of Lamictal. And I did a bunch of research before seeking out medication because I wanted to know what the side effects were and what the intended benefits were. The thing that I initially worried about, and that I know a lot of creative people worry about, is whether my meds would end up making me less creative. And I've actually found the opposite to be true. And now that I'm kind of more within a manageable range, I've actually been writing more music than I ever have. So am I pro medication? It's not for everybody. Obviously, some people are going to have really good luck with diet and exercise and sleep solutions. Other people, those things aren't going to help as much. Some people are going to have really good luck with medication. Other people are going to have a really hard time finding something that works for them. Everybody's experience is different with mental health more than almost anything else that's the case. It's about understanding yourself and figuring out what you need. I think that throughout my life, and especially in recovery and dealing with mental illness, therapy has been one of the most instrumental and most helpful things that I've ever done. And I would recommend it up and down to everybody, even if you're just experiencing some anxiety, which is normal in 2019. That's very understandable that you would be anxious. And I even went to therapy even when finances were tough. For me, it was one of those non-optionals like food or, a place to live. So yeah, that's the story of kind of how I went about getting my bipolar diagnosis. And I'm not sponsored by Doctor On Demand at all, but I highly recommend their service if you need a psychiatrist to help you manage your meds. If you have any questions about my diagnosis or what my experience with mental health is like, definitely leave a comment below, and I might even make a follow-up video if there's some things that y'all are interested in specifically. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Ring that notification bell because I'm going to be doing live streams. I'm going to be doing fan reviews. If you're interested in having your music reviewed, by the way, you can send your music to my email, aldengrovesmusic@gmail.com, and I am going to be reviewing tracks, posting clips, giving feedback, giving advice and opinions on what you're working on my YouTube channel very soon. Just submit your music. Again, that is to aldengrovesmusic@gmail.com, and I'll be doing those fan reviews soon. In any case, I appreciate you so much. Thanks for watching all the way through, and I'll see you in the next one. AG.